Jax's revenge domain. I knew my career at Safe Drive Technologies was over the moment I heard Zach Walsh's voice through the conference room wall. It wasn't when security walked me out 3 months later. It wasn't even when he tried to steal 25 years of my life's work. No, it died that Tuesday afternoon when I was grabbing coffee and heard him laughing on a speaker call with investors. We need to phase out these legacy engineers. They think too much, move too slow. Dead weight. I'm Will Harper. I'm 49 years old, and I've been building things that save lives since I got out of the Army at 24. I don't tweet about disruption or give TED Talks about innovation. I'm the guy who shows up early, stays late, and writes code that keeps your family alive on the highway. Let me back up a bit. People always ask how an old grunt like me ended up in Silicon Valley. Truth is, after 6 years fixing electronics in Kuwait and Afghanistan, civilian tech felt like kindergarten. The Army taught me 2 things: how to solve problems under pressure and how to read people who want to screw you over. Both skills came in handy. I started Safe Drive Technologies in my garage in 2018. Not the company, just the idea. Spent my weekends and evenings in that cramped space surrounded by sensor arrays and computer monitors, building something I'd been thinking about since my convoy days. How many close calls could we prevent if cars could think 2 seconds ahead? My collision prevention system took 5 years to perfect. Not my team's system. Mine. Every line of code, every calibration, every sleepless night debugging sensor arrays. The neural network that could predict crashes 2.3 seconds before impact with 99.7% accuracy. Best safety technology in the automotive industry. But here's what separates old-school engineers from these startup kids. I learned from my divorce. 8 years ago, my ex-wife's lawyer taught me an expensive lesson about protecting what you build. So when I brought my invention to Safe Drive, I did something smart. I kept the core patent. They could use it, market it, make money from it. But they licensed it from my personal holding company. If they broke the deal, I could take my engine back. The company grew around my technology. We went from 12 people in a rented office to 85 employees in a glass palace in Redwood City. I liked being CTO. Liked mentoring the young engineers, teaching them that fancy algorithms mean nothing if they fail when lives are on the line. For 3 years, everything worked. Then the venture capitalists brought in Zach Walsh, 32 years old, MBA from Stanford, resume full of growth hacking and value optimization at companies I'd never heard of. He showed up wearing a jacket that cost more than my truck payment, carrying coffee that probably cost more than most people's lunch. Will, he said that first day, not even looking at me while he poked at my prototype sensor. Love the foundational work here. Really solid legacy development, but we need to think beyond incremental improvements. It prevents fatalities, I said. He laughed. Sharp sound like breaking glass. That's the engineer mindset. I need you thinking market outcomes. We're scaling for acquisition. Major automotive players are circling. 180 million on the table, but they want streamlined IP ownership. Complexity creates liability exposure. I should have seen it coming right there. But I was focused on the work, on the next generation algorithm that could handle black ice detection, on the team of young engineers who reminded me of my younger self, hungry to build something meaningful. The changes started small. My name disappeared from the executive summary slides. The weekly engineering reviews got moved to times when I had standing appointments. I'd walk past the main conference room, the one everyone called the fishbowl because of its glass walls, and see Zach in there with marketing people, drawing my algorithms on whiteboards in wrong colors. I wasn't worried yet. You don't fire the guy who invented the thing that makes you money. That's what I told myself during those long evenings in my workshop at home, tinkering with sensor improvements while my coffee went cold. Then came the Tuesday afternoon that changed everything. I was getting coffee from the machine near the executive conference room when I heard voices through the wall. The room had thin walls, probably cost-cutting on the renovation. Zach was on speaker with someone, papers rustling in the background. The legacy personnel situation, Zach was saying, voice clear as day, Will Harper specifically, boards asking questions about the IP dependency. A gravelly voice responded from the speaker. Thought you said the patents were clean corporate assets. They will be. I'm documenting performance issues, culture fit problems, setting up the termination case. Once he's gone, we'll assert full corporate ownership, clean up the paperwork retroactively. What about the license? Agreement? Zach laughed that same sharp sound. Old school engineer, probably never read the fine print on the updates. We'll position it as work for hire development. Happens all the time. I stood there holding my coffee cup, steam rising between me and the wall, listening to them plan my professional execution. They weren't just going to fire me. They were going to steal my patent and rewrite history to make it look legal. The voice on the speaker continued. Timeline? 6 weeks max. I want him gone before the Motor Dynamics due diligence team arrives. Clean narrative sells better. I walked back to my desk on autopilot, sat down, opened my laptop. The license agreement was buried in my encrypted files folder, all 47 pages of it. I found the sections I needed. Clause 7. False ownership claims constituted material breach. Clause 14. B. Termination of licensor without cause triggered automatic revocation rights. Zach Walsh thought he was playing chess. He didn't realize I'd been setting up this game for 5 years. I pulled out my personal cell phone, never use company devices for anything that matters, and texted Patricia Coleman, my patent attorney. Former Navy JAG, tougher than a $2 steak, and the only lawyer I trusted completely. Pat, need to meet. Priority 1, they're making a play for the patent. She replied in 30 seconds. My office. 1 hour. I looked around the office. Justin Reed was debugging server code in the corner, completely absorbed. Scott Davis was putting together another PowerPoint presentation about market positioning. Normal Tuesday afternoon at SafeDrive Technologies. None of them knew that in 6 weeks, their CEO planned to commit patent fraud. I saved my work, locked my screen, and walked out to my truck. Time to remind Zach Walsh that old-school engineers know a few things about strategy, too. Patricia Coleman's law office looked exactly like you'd expect from a former Navy JAG officer. Clean lines, no wasted space, everything organized with military precision. She sat behind a steel desk that probably doubled as a bunker, wearing a Navy blazer that meant business. Talk to me, she said before I even sat down. No small talk, no how's the weather. I liked that about Pat. 20 years of dealing with military bureaucracy taught her that life's too short for pleasantries when there's a war to plan. I told her everything. The overheard conversation, Zach's timeline, the plan to claim my patent as work for hire. Pat took notes on a yellow legal pad, her handwriting neat as printed text. Timeline's tight, she said when I finished. 6 weeks isn't much room for error. But they made one critical mistake. Which is, they're assuming you're just going to roll over. She flipped through the license agreement, fingers moving like she was reading sheet music. Clause 7 and 14b give you nuclear options. Question is, do you want to blow up the whole company or just remove the tumor? I thought about Justin in the server room, debugging code until 2 a.m. because he believed in the mission. About the junior engineers who reminded me of myself at 25, hungry to build something that mattered. About the team that had nothing to do with Zach's corporate games. I want the tumor gone, I said. The good people stay. Pat nodded. Then we need evidence. Documented proof of bad faith. Right now it's your word against his, and juries love young CEOs in expensive suits. What kind of evidence? Email trail showing intent to defraud. Witnesses to false statements about IP ownership. Paper trail of the squeeze-out campaign. She leaned back in her chair. Think like the investigator you used to be in the Army, Will. What would you document if you were building a case? I spent the drive back to SafeDrive thinking about that. By the time I pulled into the parking garage, I had a plan. Not a revenge fantasy, a methodical campaign to gather ammunition. The squeeze-out started the next morning. I walked into the office at 7:30 a.m., same as I had for 5 years. My badge still worked, coffee machine still recognized my code, parking spot still had my name on it. But something felt different. Like the air pressure had changed. First sign, my Slack channels. The hashtag leadership-core channel was gone from my sidebar, just vanished. I messaged Justin about it. Hey boss, he replied 2 hours later, way longer than usual. Zach restructured the communication flow, streamlined decision-making. You're in hashtag engineering-general now. Engineering-general. Where the interns posted cat memes and asked where to find spare HDMI cables. I'd been demoted from the command center to the supply closet. Second sign, the meeting reshuffles. Wednesday's technical review got moved to conflict with my standing appointment at the VA. Thursday's R&D planning session suddenly became an executive team-only discussion. I wasn't on the executive team anymore. I started documenting everything. screenshots of the channel changes, calendar updates, email chains where I used to be included and now wasn't, all saved to my personal encrypted drive at home, backed up to cloud storage Zach couldn't touch. The really interesting stuff started happening Friday afternoon. Scott Davis bounced into my workspace wearing his usual Patagonia uniform, carrying his laptop like it contained nuclear launch codes. Kid was 24, fresh from business school, and had the strategic depth of a puddle. But he was enthusiastic, I'll give him that. "Hey, Will," he chirped. "Quick question about the IP documentation." I looked up from my code. "What about it?" "Cleaning up the patent attributions for the due diligence prep. Some of the legacy docs have individual inventor names, but Zach wants everything listed as Safe Drive Technologies proprietary development. Keeps it clean for the buyers." There it was, the smoking gun delivered by a kid who thought he was just doing paperwork. "Interesting," I said, keeping my voice level. "Which patents, specifically?" Scott opened his laptop, pulled up a spreadsheet. All the collision detection stuff. The core algorithm, the sensor integration protocols, the self-calibration routines. Zach said to standardize the attribution format. "Scott," I said, "can you email me that spreadsheet? I want to review the technical descriptions, make sure they're accurate." "Sure thing," he said, typing away. "You're awesome for double-checking this stuff. I know it's not exactly your job anymore, but I want to make sure we get it right. Not my job anymore." Interesting choice of words. "Happy to help," I said. The email arrived 10 minutes later. I forwarded it immediately to my personal account, then to Pat Coleman with a note. Exhibit A. Documented intent to falsify patent ownership. Pat's response was instant. "Beautiful. Keep them coming." I spent the weekend in my garage workshop, not just collecting evidence but thinking about the bigger picture. This wasn't just about protecting my patent anymore. This was about what happens when corporate culture decides that experience doesn't matter, that loyalty is a liability, that you can steal someone's life work and call it optimization. I thought about the young engineers on my team who looked up to me. What lesson was I teaching them if I just rolled over? That 25 years of expertise meant nothing against a PowerPoint presentation and a Stanford MBA. Monday morning brought the next escalation. I arrived at the office to find my parking spot had been temporarily reassigned due to space optimization. The spot I'd used for 5 years was now marked for visitor parking. My new spot was in the back corner, next to the dumpster. Small thing, but symbols matter. Especially in Silicon Valley, where your parking spot is a status indicator as clear as military rank insignia. I took a photo of the new parking assignment, added it to my evidence file. The team meeting that afternoon was when Zach really showed his hand. He called an all-hands engineering alignment session, which was corporate speak for listen, while I tell you how everything's going to change. "Team," he said, standing at the head of the conference table in his $200 jeans and startup founder t-shirt. "We're entering a new phase, scale-up mode. That means some of our processes need to evolve." He clicked through slides about agile methodology and rapid iteration cycles and reducing technical debt. All buzzwords that meant the same thing. Move fast, break things, don't think too hard about consequences. "Some of our legacy development approaches," Zach continued, "are slowing us down. We need to embrace a more collaborative, less hierarchical engineering culture." Legacy development approaches. He was talking about me without saying my name, about the careful testing protocols I'd built, the documentation standards that ensured our safety systems actually worked when lives were on the line. Justin raised his hand. "What about the current testing framework? Will's protocols have caught dozens of potential failures." Zach's smile got tighter. "Great question. We're implementing automated testing suites that reduce dependency on individual knowledge bases, more resilient, less prone to bottlenecks. Translation: we're replacing Will's expertise with software so we don't need Will anymore." I sat in the back of the room, taking notes, not on the presentation, on the faces around the table, the junior engineers looking confused, the senior developers exchanging glances, Justin staring at his laptop screen like it might explain what was happening. After the meeting, I walked to my truck and called Pat. "They're accelerating the timeline," I told her. "This isn't a 6-week plan anymore. More like 3 weeks. Evidence file looking good, getting better every day. Question is, when do we spring the trap? When they commit fully? When there's no walking it back?" I could hear her typing in the background. "How's your relationship with the team?" "Solid. They know something's wrong, but they're keeping their heads down. Good. You're going to need allies when this gets ugly. I hung up and sat in my truck for a moment, looking at the Safe Drive building through the windshield. Glass and steel and ambition, built around technology I'd created in my garage. Zach Walsh thought he could erase me from my own story. He was about to learn the difference between reading about corporate warfare in business school and actually fighting one. 2 weeks later, Zach called the meeting that would end his career. He just didn't know it yet. Strategic restructuring session, the calendar invite said. All hands mandatory. 2 p.m. Friday in the Fishbowl conference room. I'd been expecting this. The evidence file on my encrypted drive was 47 pages thick now. Screenshots, emails, witness statements from team members who were getting tired of watching good engineering get steamrolled by corporate politics. Pat Coleman and I had rehearsed this moment a dozen times. Let him commit, she'd said. Let him say the words in front of witnesses. Once he claims ownership publicly, there's no walking it back. I arrived early and took a seat in the back corner where I could see everyone's faces. The whole team filed in looking confused and nervous. Justin sat near the front, laptop open, ready to take notes like the good soldier he was. Scott Davis bounced in carrying a stack of papers, still oblivious to the role he'd played in building the case against his boss. Zach walked in at exactly 2 p.m. wearing a navy blazer that probably cost more than most people's mortgage payment. He had the confident swagger of a man who thought he was about to win big. Team, he said, voice projecting without effort. Today marks a turning point for Safe Drive Technologies. He clicked to his first slide, Strategic Partnership Announcement. Motor Dynamics logo filled the screen. Motor Dynamics Corporation has agreed to acquire our collision prevention technology for $180 million, Zach continued. This represents validation of everything we've built here. Scattered applause from the marketing team. The engineers sat quietly, waiting for the other shoe to drop. To complete this transaction, Zach said, clicking to the next slide, we need clean, corporate ownership of all intellectual property. No individual patents, no licensing complications, no legacy agreements that create liability exposure. There it was, the moment we'd been building toward. Scott Davis raised his hand. What about Will's original patents? Those are still under the personal license agreement, right? Zach's smile got sharper. Actually, Scott, that's been resolved. Legal review determined that all collision detection technology was developed as work for hire during Will's employment. Standard corporate IP assignment. The room went quiet. You could hear the HVAC system humming. I felt every eye in the room turn toward me. Justin's face went pale. Even Scott looked confused, like he was trying to remember something important. Furthermore, Zach continued, warming to his theme, effective immediately. We're streamlining the engineering department to align with Motor Dynamics' development culture. That means some personnel changes. He paused for effect, savoring the moment. Will Harper, he said, looking straight at me, your employment with Safe Drive Technologies is terminated. For cause, insubordination and failure to adapt to evolving corporate requirements. The silence stretched out like a held breath. This was it. The public execution, designed to send a message to anyone else who might question the new order. I stood up slowly, picked up my notebook. Every person in that room was staring at me, waiting to see how the old engineer would handle getting tossed aside. Zach, I said, voice calm and level, you just made a very expensive mistake. He laughed, that sharp sound I'd learned to hate. The only mistake was keeping dead weight this long. Your patent is company property, Will, has been for 5 years. Read the fine print. I wrote the fine print, I said. I walked toward the door, but stopped next to Justin's chair, leaned down and whispered, back up the servers. Everything. Tonight. Then I walked out of the fishbowl, through the open office, past the motivational posters about innovation and disruption, toward the elevators. Behind me, I could hear Zach already moving on to the next slide, talking about exciting opportunities and fresh perspectives. He thought the hard part was over. I pulled out my personal phone as the elevator doors closed and called Pat Coleman. It's done, I said. Public termination for cause, claimed my patent is work for hire in front of the entire team. Beautiful, Pat said. I could hear papers shuffling in the background. Time to execute the nuclear option. You sure about this, Will? Once we send the revocation notice, there's no going back. I thought about Justin's face when Zach announced the termination. About the junior engineers who'd looked to me for guidance, now watching their mentor get discarded like outdated equipment. About 25 years of building things that mattered, reduced to dead weight by a kid in an expensive blazer. Send it, I said. 24-hour countdown starts now. I walked out of the Safe Drive building into the California afternoon. The sun felt different somehow, warmer. I had 24 hours to wait, while Pat's legal notice worked its way through Motor Dynamics' due diligence team. Then the real fireworks would start. That evening, I sat in my garage workshop with a beer in my phone, watching the text messages roll in from team members. Justin. Dude, what just happened? This is insane. Kevin from R&D. Zach's celebrating in his office. Ordered champagne. This feels wrong. Sarah from QA. Half the team is talking about quitting. We know who really built this thing. I didn't reply to any of them. Couldn't risk tipping my hand. But it felt good to know that loyalty still meant something to some people. Around 10 p.m., my phone rang. Unknown number, but I recognized the area code. Detroit. Motor Dynamics headquarters. Mr. Harper? Unfamiliar voice, professional but cautious. This is Michael Sterling, lead counsel for Motor Dynamics. We received some concerning documentation this afternoon regarding IP ownership of the Safe Drive collision system. Here we go, I thought. Hello, Mr. Sterling. I assume you're referring to the license revocation notice, among other things. Mr. Harper, we're currently conducting final due diligence on a $180 million acquisition based on the assumption that Safe Drive owns clear title to this technology. They don't, I said simply. They licensed it from me. As of 4:23 p.m. today, that license was revoked due to material breach of contract. Long pause. I could hear keyboards clicking in the background. Mr. Harper, if what you're saying is accurate, Motor Dynamics is about to purchase a very expensive collection of office furniture. That's correct. And Mr. Walsh terminated your employment this afternoon in front of the entire engineering team, called my patent work for hire, and claimed corporate ownership. Another pause. Longer this time. Mr. Harper, I need to make some calls. Thank you for bringing this to our attention. He hung up. I sat back in my workshop chair, surrounded by the tools and components that had been my companions for decades. Oscilloscopes and sensor arrays, computer monitors and development boards, the honest machinery of creation. My phone buzzed with a text from Pat. Motor Dynamics legal team just called. They're not happy. Expect fireworks Monday morning. I looked at my watch. 11:47 p.m. In 16 hours and 36 minutes, Zach Walsh's world was going to explode. I finished my beer and went to bed. For the first time in weeks, I slept like a baby. Monday morning, 8:30 a.m. I was drinking coffee in my garage when my phone started buzzing like an angry wasp. Text after text from people at Safe Drive. Justin. Emergency board meeting called. Zach looks like he saw a ghost. Kevin. Legal team running around like the building's on fire. Sarah. Motor Dynamics suits just walked out, didn't even finish the presentation. I smiled and took another sip of coffee. Right on schedule. At 9:15 a.m., my phone rang. Safe Drive main number. Will? Voice I didn't recognize. Panicked. This is Richard Blackwood, General Counsel. We need to talk, immediately. Hello, Richard, I said. I assume you got my attorney's notice? Will, let's not do anything hasty. The termination. We can call it a restructuring. Layoff with full severance. Maybe even a consulting agreement. Interesting offer, I said. What about the patent ownership issue? Long pause. There might have been miscommunication about the IP status. We can clarify that. Miscommunication. I laughed. Richard, your CEO claimed my patent as work for hire in front of 50 witnesses. That's not miscommunication. That's fraud. Will, please. Motor Dynamics is walking away. $180 million. You're destroying the company. I'm not destroying anything, I said. I'm just taking my engine back. Your CEO forgot that if you don't own the patent, you can't sell it. What do you want? Finally. The right question. Full reversion of all IP rights to my holding company. Clean slate. And Zach Walsh's resignation. That would essentially dissolve the company. That's Zach's problem, not mine. He made his bed. I hung up and went back to my coffee. Around noon, Pat Coleman called with an update that made my day. Motor Dynamics filed suit this morning, she said, sounding delighted. Fraud in the inducement. They're seeking damages for the full $180 million plus legal fees. Safe Drive's insurance won't cover intentional fraud. And Zach? Board emergency session ended an hour ago. He's done. Terminated for cause, no golden parachute. They're also pursuing personal liability, claims against him for exceeding his authority. I thought about that for a moment. Zach Walsh, the golden boy with the Stanford MBA and the expensive blazers, getting fired the same way he'd fired me. Except unlike me, he didn't have a backup plan. What about the team? That's the interesting part. The board wants to negotiate. They know they need you back to have any hope of salvaging this. By Wednesday, the negotiations were over. Not because I was desperate to return. I had offers from 3 other automotive companies by then, but because I wanted to make sure the good people landed safely. The terms were simple. Full IP reversion to Harper Technologies, my personal holding company. Safe Drive could license the technology for existing customer support, but no new development without my permission. I'd return as an independent consultant, not an employee, to help transition the engineering team to new leadership. Most importantly, Justin Reed would become the new CTO. Kid had earned it. The first day back was surreal. Walking into the Safe Drive office where my parking spot had been restored, my name back on the engineering reports, the team looking at me like I'd just returned from the dead. Zach's corner office was empty now. Boxes of his personal items sat stacked in the hallway like a monument to overconfidence. The ceremonial gavel he'd loved so much was gathering dust on the reception desk. Justin called an engineering team meeting that afternoon. Not in the fishbowl. We used the smaller conference room where people actually got work done. Okay, he said, looking around the table at faces that had been through a war. New rules. No more corporate buzzword bingo. No more pivot to growth mindset nonsense. We build things that save lives. That's the mission. I looked at these young engineers, bright, dedicated people who'd chosen to work in automotive safety because they wanted their code to matter. They deserved leaders who understood that. Will's staying on as senior technical advisor, Justin continued. But I want to be clear. We're not going back to the old ways just because the new ways didn't work. We're going forward with the best of both. Kevin raised his hand. What about the motor dynamics deal? Dead and buried, I said. But Ford called yesterday. So did GM and Toyota. Turns out, when you're not trying to commit patent fraud, people are interested in technology that actually works. The room relaxed. People started asking real questions about technical roadmaps and development priorities, the kind of conversations that had been impossible under Zach's regime of corporate theater. After the meeting, I walked out to the parking lot with Justin. Kid looked older somehow. 3 weeks of chaos had aged him faster than 3 years of normal engineering work. You okay with this? I asked. CTO's a big job. He nodded. Scared as hell, but okay. Thanks for coming back. Didn't do it for the company, I said. Did it for them. For team. You guys deserve better than getting steamrolled by someone else's ambition. 6 months later, I was spending more time in my garage workshop than at Safe Drive's offices. The new licensing deals were bringing in steady revenue. Justin was proving to be an excellent CTO, focused on engineering excellence instead of corporate politics. My phone rang one evening while I was testing a new sensor array. Unknown number, but I recognized the voice immediately. Will Harper? Young voice, nervous but determined. This is Amy Blackwood from Berkeley. I'm graduating next month with a degree in automotive engineering. Professor Martinez said I should call you. Martinez, good man. One of the few engineering professors who still believed in teaching students to build things instead of just talking about building things. What can I do for you, Amy? I've been following the Safe Drive story. The way you handled the patent situation, the way you protected your team. I'm looking for a mentor, someone who can teach me how to be that kind of engineer. I smiled, looking around my garage at the collection of tools and components that had been my companions for 25 years. Time to pass some knowledge along. Can you start Monday? I asked. 3 months later, I had 4 mentees working in my garage. Young engineers from different companies, learning what they don't teach in school, how to protect your work, how to stand up to corporate bullies, how to build things that actually matter. One of them, a kid named Marcus from a Detroit startup, had just filed his first patent. Smart kid, but naive about business. Remember, I told him, corporations will try to convince you that your ideas belong to them. That innovation is a team sport where the team gets credit and the company gets ownership. So what do? Read every contract, understand every clause, and never forget, You're not just an employee, you're an inventor. Act like it. The news about Zach Walsh trickled in over the following months. SEC investigation for securities fraud, personal bankruptcy. His LinkedIn profile now listed him as seeking new opportunities. The golden boy who'd thought he could rewrite the rules had learned the hard way that some rules exist for good reasons. Me? I was back where I belonged. In my garage, building things that mattered, teaching young engineers that skill and integrity beat corporate politics every time. The automotive industry is small. Word gets around. The story of Safe Drive Technologies became a cautionary tale about what happens when you underestimate the quiet guy in the corner who actually built the thing you're trying to sell. These days, when I walk into industry conferences, people know who I am. Not because I give TED Talks or post on social media, but because I'm the engineer who reminded Silicon Valley that intellectual property law isn't just a suggestion. Real power doesn't announce itself with expensive blazers and corporate buzzwords. It shows up with documentation, preparation, and the absolute certainty that when you build something worthwhile, you protect it. Some lessons can only be learned the hard way. Zach Walsh learned his lesson. The rest of us just got to watch. In corporate America, they'll respect your experience only after you've proven you're willing to defend it. Loyalty without leverage is just wishful thinking. The quiet engineer who documents everything and reads every contract will always outlast the loud executive who thinks charisma can rewrite the law.